Welcome back, everybody. We just Bill, I'm going to tee this up again. You reached out to me to help you with some content for a recap of immigration in 2023. That led us down sort of a rabbit hole with this whole UBI, Universal Basic Income. You and I got on a call, and then my blood pressure shot up, as it always does. And I asked you to come on here so that we can capture it for the audience. Tell me what the heck is going on in Canada right now.
Yeah, just there's a lot of stuff going on. I think that the economic situation is very grim. Canada is last in the OECD countries group of 28 countries, and our governments right across the country are in dire financial straits. We've got governments that are focusing on World Economic Forum and Agenda 2030 and United Nations issues rather than on, what they should be doing, taking care of Canadians. And it's been going on much too long with Trudeau now. And we find ourselves in very difficult financial situations and economic times, as alluded to by that, we're ranked at the bottom of the OECD 28 group of developed countries. It's just typical what's going on across the country, and we are starting to see, a poor recovery out of COVID and our ability to bounce back from that. We've got a federal government that's got a globalist agenda that wants to implement all of the crazy things that are going on in Agenda 2030 and the World Economic Forum, and Trudeau sees himself as a superstar globalist hero that's gonna save the world, but it's really destroying Canada. And a lot of things are happening that have seen mass immigration rushing through the doors in an unprecedented way. I believe it's the largest mass migration of movement of people in history. I haven't been able to find anything that's really larger than that on a per capita basis, along with the strains that we were feeling on the system before. It's putting many Canadians into dire straits.
Let's walk through what exactly is universal basic income. Are they printing money? Are we going into debt? Is this confiscation through taxation?
Yeah, anything that the government is doing these days is on borrowed money. They've way overextended themselves, made too many promises, and it's just not working financially for the country. I don't know the last time that we ever saw a balanced budget, and we're starting to feel a lot of the pressures as a result of that financial incompetence, and that's translating into Canadians as well, what they're feeling, what their impacts are, and what's happening with their situations on a personal level. So one of the communist, socialist, Marxist nirvana ideas was UBI, Universal Basic Income, where everybody is just given a flat rate of income that they're guaranteed by the government. They're going to be printing money to make sure that everybody's given a flat basic level of income, which I would suggest they're going to set at the what they consider the poverty level, but it's just something. You had suggested earlier, it's probably a good way to get votes. Give people money for nothing, and their checks for free. So we will see, how much of that plays into it. It's been tried before in Canada, and it's a talking point around the world with all of the communist, Marxist, globalists.
Well, however they do it, whether they physically print the money, if they go into debt, or if they redistribute wealth, it's just going to lead to inflation. Like, printing money isn't going to bring down the price of bread or blueberries. It's probably going to increase it because you have people that aren't working, but they're consuming. Like, how long is this going to last? 5 years before the country implodes?
Yeah, certainly on its way now. Last time we had a major implosion like this was in Rome, where they had a massive movement of people into the country relative to the Roman population. It wasn't really that large compared to Canada. It was estimated about 200,000 Goths came into Rome in 376. And at that point in time, Rome was cheering. They saw all these people arriving on the shores of the Danube, which was the northern part of the Roman Empire. That at that point they were being chased out of their Gothic homeland by the Huns. And so they showed up at the rivers, and there was tens of thousands of people that were crossing into the river and crossing the river into Rome. And the Romans were so excited they were going to have people that were going to be working in their farm fields, working the infrastructure that was sorely lacking in funding and labor. They were going to be working in their hospitals and their schools, and they were ecstatic that these people were coming in. At the end of the day, I think about 220,000 people came in off the Gothic mass movement. So compared to the 1.2 million that's Canada's seen just in the last 12 months. It's so that civilization only lasted about 2 years after that, after Rome having survived for over 400 years. Certainly Western Rome, they became Constantine over in Eastern Rome was able to hold on and preserve the Roman Empire for several hundred years after that. But so it's hard to say when the thing is imploding. I think most Canadians are aware that the system is collapsing currently as we speak, like it's happening right now. Just pray that you don't happen to be one of the ones that gets in the way of the what's happening. Some of the indications are that the middle class in Canada has virtually disappeared. It's virtually no more. The middle class was always considered, they based it on 5 quintiles of income, 20% at 5 different levels. There was the bottom 20%, there was the top 20%, and middle class sort of made up the middle 3 quintiles, they're 20% brackets. But looking at the income levels of that 20% brackets today, the top 3 of them would be under the poverty line, with the top the third one getting about $60,000 a year in income, which with the price of everything going today in Canada, with housing inflation, with food inflation, and the costs of out of control governments and control of the economy through oligopoly corporations that are relentless in charging Canadians for their goods and services. I would suggest that there's only a very small portion of Canadians that are left in the middle class, predominantly higher levels of income over that $60,000 threshold, and that would put 4.2 million employees that are working for government, and then you have the elites. So it's
I wonder if this is almost like I guess it's a conspiracy, but it's almost a union between corporations, like the corporate class coming in and buying up all the assets, and government that just wants to, government is a lot easier for them to enslave people if they work with 1 or 2 or a handful of corporations. So they're regulating everything to death. Like, people can't own property. You cannot own land if they're capping the rate at which you can increase rent, but the property value and thus the property tax is raising at a much higher rate. So the inevitable result is that you're going to sell.
Yeah. Canada. Most Canadians today are
just going to turn into some sort of
indentured servants. From the days of old of feudalism. If you look at that, even in those top, bottom 3 categories of income, almost 50% is disappearing to income tax. And then if you look at your regular household budget, there's insurance and utilities and heating and gas and a whole range of things that for a lot of instances are eating up almost another 40% of people's income, and they're having to live off that extra 10%, just trying to survive and put food on their family's table. So obviously that's going to create the potential and the risk for governments for a huge amount of social unrest when people feel that they're there's no future. Talk to our children. There's no future. There's no way they're ever going to be able to buy a home in the same way that the middle class, what was before in the past. And if you compare, go back to the 1950s, what was the middle class? Well, it was solidly those three middle 20% quintiles that we spoke about. But one husband, with a wife and several children, he could make enough money to go out and fund the mortgage on their house, buy a car, take one or two vacations every year. But ever since, for quite a while now, that's been closing down, and all of a sudden you needed two incomes to, just to pay all your regular bills, and a lot of those extras like vacations or a new car every 5 years, something like that, are no longer a reality for most Canadians.
So, what's the cause of this quasi poverty? Like, is it
That's
is it the
part of
money
it.
is being siphoned off and going to the
Certainly, as part of the
managerial class
elites,
bureaucracy?
have a controlling interest on a significant portion of that. There was a recent report from Stats Canada that I was looking at that showed that bottom. I'm not sure if it was 1 and 2 or 1, 2, 3 quintile had about 2.5% of the country's wealth, and that top quintile controlled 67% of the wealth. So we've have a huge gap between the top and the bottom, the rich and the poor, like a few times we've seen before in history. And on top of that, they're making things even worse off. Closing down our food supplies with crazy climate change initiative plans and laws, and cutting back on fertilizer and product quotas. That's happening. We've got they're virtually destroyed small business, and small business always was, going back to the days of Plato, that they what was a good what made a solid community, and even back then a large part of it was the large middle class that created all the wealth, and it helped provide for the economic growth. The people on the bottom, they're just trying to get by and survive. They can't think about investing, and when you get too heavy with too many people on the top that are taking too much of the wealth away from the country, you're not leaving anything in the hands of a middle class, small business class that has got the ability to grow and invest and create that wealth that a growing country needs. So that it's just I don't know where it's going to go, but certainly we've been watching these trends, and when you put on the destruction of the mass immigration, it's been all sold on a pack of lies that we examined together very closely and saw that, hey, what, it's about a labor shortage. No, it's not, because Stat Can came out with a report that there was 2 million qualified high skilled laborers for only 1 million jobs. So that turned out to be a misinformation. We're bringing in 1.2 million people that have arrived in the last 12 months at all classifications to replace an aging workforce. That baby boomer workforce in 1959 was, like, the year that I was born. I think that was the largest number of baby boomer births ever, and it was only 350. The generations today, the baby boom generations, are finding out they're living longer. They're going to be living 25 or 30 years in retirement. They just won't be able to retire, and they need to keep going and find alternative sources of occupations and income. So as a result, Stats Can report on labor force survey showed that plus 65 category, only 80,000 of them left the workforce last year, because they just a lot of them are still able to work. They want to work. They want to stay engaged with the community. They want to be active and think that they're being productive. So that was another lie about this mass immigration that was proven to be complete misinformation.
I want shifting gears. Have you
No,
heard
I
about
haven't
this
heard about that.
second
Obviously,
CPP they're
you know,
introducing? I think it's
I
CPP
used to
2.
spend a lot of time watching the pension issues, the Canada Pension Plan and the old age security and the guaranteed income security as a result of the book that I wrote that really sort of vaulted me into public commentary. It was called the Pension Ponzi. It was a bestseller book in Canada, mainly supported by business communities out of the CFIB and the Canadian Taxpayers Federations that took it on as fundraisers and heavily promoted the book, which, you know, I felt blessed to see it become a bestseller, which in Canada is not a whole lot of books. It's only 5,000, but you know, I was hoping I could have gone on to write a bestseller for the United States. It would have been 50,000, but so yeah, we've seen an expansion of the CPP at one point in time. It was called the Big CPP, and it was mainly for the benefit of the public sector unions. The average Canadian today is collecting about $700 in CPP out of a potential, you know, $1,500 a year. But the only way you can get that is if you've, you know, put full contributions at the highest levels into the CPP over your working career. So that strongly included the heavily supported labor unions. Not many left in the private sector, so that the labor unions today in Canada are predominantly just a beast of the public sector, with 80% of the public sector involved with the, you know, belonging to a labor union. It's down about 15% in the you know, in the private sector, and they're the ones that benefit, with the average federal worker, which is, you know, grown substantially since Trudeau has gotten in, is earning about $130,000 a year in compensation. A lot of that's the taxpayer pension contribution or other health and dental benefits that they'll get. But a typical, you know, public sector employee, when they retire, they're going to be hitting an income in the 70, 80, 90, and, you know, hundreds of thousands in the plus $100,000 a year range. And that contrasts with the average Canadian over 65. Their median income is barely $35,000. So that, you know, considering the huge inflation that we've had in the economy, the cost of housing, the cost of food, insurance, utilities, all the other stuff going up, that $35,000 a year for a Canadian over age 65 would not even allow them to live in it's in one of our major cities, where we're seeing the rents today going over, you know, $2,300 a month on average. Like, they wouldn't have very much left out of that income, you know, $3,000 a month, and they're spending $2,400 on rent. So it's just we have a completely incompetent, corrupt, criminal government that's running our system now. It goes back to the description that was provided to us by Hayek, and he wrote the book in 1946, The Road to Serfdom, and he's very accurately described where we were going to be, and I would suggest where we are today. Some of the things that he had pointed out was that in politics, eventually, the worst of them all rise to the top. You know, look at the qualifications of our federal ministers with the Trudeau government. You know, same problem right across all levels of municipal and provincial government. You know, at all, a lot of these people have been, you know, have never had a bigger job in their life, and, you know, they're going to hold on to them at whatever, you know, cost they can. And this mass immigration happened to be a good way for them to attract votes. Promise more immigration, and you'll collect the votes.
I'm running federally as a candidate for the PPC, but I've been looking provincially at my province of BC, and they're not just evil They're very clever. What the province has done, I don't know if you're following, the province took over municipal land planning. So now the province, not the cities, are planning the cities. So how big the building is, how big it's going to be, how many people are going to move in. This is going to have an impact on utilities. So if you build like 10 skyscrapers, you need a hell of a lot more sewage. But the province is not the one that's going to pay for that. That's going to come for the local municipal property taxes. So they've created this division where the people who make the decisions are essentially not subject to the ramifications of those decisions. So
Well, that
I think
happened right at the
like
top. And we're certainly
it's
seeing
almost
that
like they're
with,
getting away
you know,
with
the
it.
mass
What do you
immigration that we are bringing in. Trudeau is the one that's, you know, pushing it, and he's the one that's able to make all the immigration laws and allow, in the last quarter, 430,000 people came into the country. That's massive. Canada never had a level of immigration, you know, that high in any year, and we just brought them in 3 months. You know, think of the pressures on housing and healthcare and education over the course of the year. That 1.2 million was bigger than some decades that we'd had, you know, leading up to 1867, or since 1867. And as a result, what Trudeau has brought in, this globalist Agenda 2030 migration compact deal of mass migration, but he's dropped it onto the two lower levels of government that are having to pick up to it, spending hundreds of billions and millions of dollars and own billions of dollars of social housing, for example. Last year, in the healthcare got overloaded because of this mass immigration, and 17,000 people died waiting for medical procedures. That's, you know, of course, the provinces pick up. Education, that's picked up by the provinces. September of last year, a local community, Airdrie, Alberta, they showed up on September 1st, and all of a sudden there was 1,000 extra students that they weren't prepared for, wondering where the hell they came from. And that required an extra 32 portables. And, you know, it was the equivalent of almost a whole new school in the small community that they're located in. And it would, you know, to build a school is going to take 4 or 5 years. So the federal government, with this mass immigration, without any consideration about whether or not we can afford it, or, you know, just provide for enough health care and education, they drop that onto the provinces. And the cities, they're having to deal with the homelessness and the food banks and a friggin' disaster that's happened in Canada. I haven't heard enough about. You might be a little bit more exposed to it in, you know, living close to Vancouver and hearing about it. But it's these, you know, free street drugs. Can you imagine that? Drugs that used to be illegal, deadly addictive opioids. They're handing out like candy, you know, on the streets of our major cities. The implications of that are massive. And Trudeau is able to wash his hands and saying, no, I'm not responsible for that. I don't have anything to do with education or, you know, social problems on the streets of our cities, or health care, or, you know, housing the homeless. And that's sort of where you're seeing it coming from. It's a conundrum for governments. I don't have too much respect for the provincial government in BC and their ability to, you know, really focus on what needs to be done. So, of course, they're handing that down to the municipalities. I don't know. Yeah, I had heard that zoning in BC was now going to be restricted to, if you had a single family lot, you're going to have to put on a minimum of 6 housing units. And my brother, who owns a horse ranch in BC, was saying the same thing. Before, you couldn't even get a severance on your property to put on a second home for one of your children or grandchildren, something like that. And now, when transfer of acreages takes place in BC, they're mandating two residences on each property. So they're trying to deal with a situation that's out of control. There's no way they're going to be ever able to catch up on that 1.2 million people that we had come into the country last year. The country had only built 250,000 homes. So do the math. 250,000 new homes, 1.2 million people. no way it's going to happen. And the alarming thing that's happened because of the problems with supply chains and taxation and zoning restrictions and all that other sort of stuff, which some of it's just sort of a erroneous blame. The housing starts across the country are down 22%. And in the major cities where the massive amount of our, newcomers are going, Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal, they're down over 30%. So it's some sort of a plan that somebody has created, that Trudeau is the guy who's following it and implementing it to absolutely destroy the country. There's no way that the country is going to be able to survive this. We're going to see more and more problems, not only those social problems that I was indicating to you, but we're starting to see, in Calgary, we had a massive riot. Eritrean newcomers from the country, from Eritrea, were on the streets battling it out with machetes and knives. It was the biggest, violent interaction Calgary had ever had. Or we see the Sikh violence that's happening here in Canada with political assassinations, massive destructions of attempts to destroy Hindu temples, protesting and fighting for a Khalistani homeland here in Canada, and the most alarming one, of course, recently is all these massive protests on the streets with Hamas protesters, supporters who are making death threats on the streets that the police aren't doing anything about, bombing synagogues, and it's just 2024 is going to be one hell of a year, I can promise you that.
Yeah, it's I guess on a lighter note, if they want to make a Palestinian homeland in Canada, we should offer up Ottawa to take it.
Yeah, so that sort of is an overall picture of what's happening, but it's all interconnected. It all ties in, so that if Canadians, are seeing themselves being wiped out of the middle class, how are we going to support them? We're bringing in these massive numbers of people in order to support the labor force. It's all turned out to be very, very much bogus, and at the same time, one of the chief advisors to Trudeau was Barton. I forget what his name, Dominic Barton from McKinsey. He's told the Manufacturers Association that automation was going to wipe out up to 45% of all Canadian jobs. So I guess as your politician, you're looking at this and saying, oh my gosh, I got to get those votes somewhere, but I'm not going to get votes from people who are unemployed or living in food banks or homeless on the streets. So what can I do? Well, let's just print money and give it to them, to try and support them. But you're right. I don't think there's any understanding of the unintended consequences of any of this, and certainly you pointed out an interesting one that it's going to generate a lot more inflation, which we're already struggling with. We're going to end up like Argentina very soon.
Yeah, what really frustrates me is I can see the government, they're the cause of the problem. So take housing. I was looking at the price of housing. It skyrocketed in 2001. And at the same time, the only thing that really changed was the M3 money supply. So either you can blame foreign money, it floods into the country, or the government lowered interest rates and printed money. The price of property rises. People get angry. Rather than remedying the problem, the original problem, they turn to the people that are angry, usually the young voters, and they say, it's a shame that you're never going to own your own home. Let's take it away from this guy and we'll give it to you. So the people that want property are eroding property rights, thinking that it's never going to come back to bite them in the ass. In 5-10 years, the government will just do it to them. This whole redistribution of wealth.
Yeah, that's part of that roadmap.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
The road to serfdom, where it pointed out how, we're eventually going to get to a point where people are going to demand tyrannical governments because things are so bad and so out of control that they want somebody to, take a strong arm and, lead us out of the problems that we have. And one of the other major sort of factor that Hayek pointed out in Road to Serfdom was controlled governments. Governments deciding who's going to be able to, buy what, who's going to be buying what at what prices, who are those goods that are manufactured and produced, who are they going to? One of the inbred challenges that we have in Canada is with corporatism, where major corporations, are dictating to governments pricing, regulations, market competition, and the public sector employees, they're happy to go along with this, working with the elites, because all of their $1.2 trillion of investments in their pensions that they're going to be living off of in their retirement, they're benefiting from these oligopoly partnerships. For example, what is the reason for mass immigration? As we went through and looked at it, collapse in our GDP on a per capita basis is actually falling at an alarming rate. But as that happens, that means corporations have cheaper employees, so they're making more profits. The GDP per person doesn't really impact them. And the other area that they're going to be seeing huge gains are in the increase of customers. In the last quarter of last year, for example, the telecom companies in 3 months, because of this mass immigration, they had an increase of 400,000. TELUS was just one of them. 400,000 new customers that were having to buy mobile phones, that were having to buy internet services. So they were benefiting wildly from that. And then a couple of months into the new year, they announced they were laying off 6,000 customer service people as they saw this huge increase of customers. So billions and billions of dollars of they're not only the largest commercial real estate holders in Canada, but it turns out now they're owning hundreds of thousands of residential properties as well that they're renting to. They think the increase in housing costs from $1,400 to $2,400, that's all profit that's going into their pockets. Look at this new crazy national housing program where they want to build 5.2 million homes by 2030. Like, it's lunacy. We're building 250,000 a year now. How could they possibly bring on that much? But they said, oh, hey, well, our priority is going to be 2 million rental units so that the low-income people have some place to live and they can rent. 2 million units at an average rent at $2,400 a month. That's $67 billion a year. That forecast from our friend Klaus Schwab over at the World Economic Forum, you are going to own nothing. But will you really be happy? I can assure you the significant portion of those 2 million rental units that are going to produce $67 billion a year are going to be owned by the public sector employee pension plans. As they look to diverse how they're going to make their income. So it's I don't know. I'm a historian, historic aficionado, but I haven't seen too many circumstances before in history that are lining up quite the way the stars are for the globalist masters